So, welcome back everyone. First day. I trust it's been beneficial. I trust you chilled out a little bit, hopefully. Tonight I'd like to talk about insight and insight meditation. And I thought the best way to do that would be to also talk about what happens when we don't have insight. The opposite of insight, when we have ignorance, as I spoke about last night. And I want to start it with reading two verses from the Dhammapada. I think the Dhammapada, I don't know when it was written, but it's verses of Buddha's teachings. And I think it was the first book I ever read on Buddhism. And the first two verses go like this. And there's various translations, and I'll retranslate this as well. Our life is shaped by our mind. We become what we think. Suffering follows an evil thought as the wheels of a cart follow the oxen that draw it. Our life is shaped by our mind. We become what we think. Joy follows a pure thought, like a shadow that never leaves. I feel this, I tend not to use the word evil. I tend to use the word unwholesome or unhelpful. And I don't think the Buddha would use the word evil. He would have used the word akusala. That would have been his term. And the other term that we use there, pure thought, I wouldn't necessarily use the word pure thought. I would use the word wholesome thought or a helpful thought. And it points to this, that there's two directions that we can follow. One direction is the right direction, and the other direction is the wrong direction, basically. If we're in the direction, if we want to become awakened, we want to wake up from the dream, wake up from the stories, wake up and be free from suffering that we cause ourselves, then it's useful to go in the right direction. In Pali, that's called kusala. The wrong direction is called akusala. And it's like we sort of make the decision about whether to go kusala or akusala every moment of our conscious choosing. It's either towards well-being and happiness in the long run, or towards misery and unhappiness and being entrapped in the long run. So, what happens is that we, as I described last night, we tend to get caught up in patterns of grasping after things, driven by craving, grasping after like this yearning or incessant thirst for something that's unsatisfiable. Like, even when we get what we're craving for, it still doesn't satisfy. It's quite illusionary. Craving is different than desire. I remember the old translations used to talk about desire is the cause of suffering. Desire is pretty cool sometimes, very helpful. If you guys didn't have helpful desires, you wouldn't be here. It's desires can be very beneficial insofar as we could understand them as aspirations in many respects. So craving is a little bit different. It's this grasping after, there's a tightness about this, there's a holding on it, there's an insistence that something should be the way we want it. And it actually draws us out of being present with experience. It creates this illusion that there's happiness out there. When we get that thing, we will be happy. When we get what we want. Anyway, could talk a lot about craving. The other one that we talked about last night was aversion or hatred, which is rejecting, condemning, avoiding, pushing away, resisting, all these being aggressive towards experience. And that automatically sets up this sense of divisiveness. Is that a word? Divisiveness. Like sets you sort of divided from everything else. A disconnection, kind of shrinking on yourself because there's me in here and you's out there. And, you know, you're working out how not to have these things outside. There's a lot we can talk about with the old world, and maybe we'll talk more about that when we give a talk on metta. And for those of you who won't be here, I'll probably record it. I might put it up in the net. And ignorance is the other one. Ignorance. Ignorance is kind of not knowing, not seeing clearly, misunderstanding, misperceiving. Another way of describing is being deluded. And these three patterns, they're deep, they're deeply rooted in our psyche. They're pervasive, deeply rooted, far-reaching. And it takes insight to uproot them. It takes insight to uproot these patterns. And there's a couple of tendencies that block us from, but hold us back, I guess. We could call them fetters, if you like. Does anybody know what a fetter? Any horse people? A fetter, I think, a fetter is something that holds a horse back. And a fetter is something that holds us back from, restrains us from moving forward. So in Buddhism, there are 10 fetters, and I'm not going to list them all because I can't always remember them, but I know them in my heart because I've experienced them many times. And they include the hindrances that I spoke about last night, which I hope to talk a little bit more about tonight in detail. Do you remember I spoke last night about obsessive desire, obsessive craving, obsessive desire, like grasping after, ill will, which I've just mentioned, restlessness and worry and mental agitation, mental thickness and dullness and chronic procrastination. These are the 5 hindrances. Or paralysing doubt, or this stuckness in uncertainty, where we don't move. So they're included in the fetters. But there's another really interesting one that's included in the fetters. And it's called, it literally translates as conceit. Interesting, conceit. It's sort of about conceiving about ourselves, self-concepts. But it's a little bit more than just a self-concept. It's the Pali word for it is mana. Mana. M-A-N-A, if you want to write it in English. Mana actually is a root to say to measure. Like I've seen this in some languages that M-A-N-A is like a measure, to measure something. And what we tend to do is we measure ourselves against something. Either against ourselves, we conceive of ourselves and we measure it against something. We compare ourselves to something. Either we compare ourselves to other people, or other things, or other ideals, or ideal people, or compare ourselves to our previous selves, concepts of experiences of ourselves previously or in the future or ideals. And we're either better, worse, or the same. So like this is making measure of something. It's an interesting way of describing conceit, isn't it? So, this is a theta. Actually, this theta, in the process of awakening, when we talked about grades of awakening and levels of awakening, a little bit last night, not a lot. I just mentioned, you can be fully awakened like the Buddha, or there's relative awakening to various processes. So on the scale of things, mana, or self-conceit, this idea that we are something and we compare ourselves, we become something that's comparable to something else, is the last of the fetters to go on the process of awakening. I'm pretty sure that's right. I read that once and I've heard it a few times. But it's the last fetter to go before we're fully awakened, meaning that we're fully free. So it takes a while to overcome. And it does cause a lot of suffering. And I'm going to talk a little bit about my own process with this. But I just want to say also that part of the way we cause ourselves a lot of suffering is that we create stories. In Buddhism it's called mental formations, like we create things, we form things, we're constantly doing it. We're sitting here, I'm sitting here now, I'm looking out there and I can see lots of colours, a few colours and dark and shades of light and dark, and I'm perceiving people. But I'm sort of conceiving of you at the same time. It's like I can see a shape over there and there's all these processes of familiarisation. And I conceive of Lisa. There's Lisa. Hello, Lisa. Lisa's just a concept in my mind. The way Lisa thinks about herself is very different than the way I think about myself. So it's kind of like we're constantly projecting and conceiving of things from this massive information that we get. And we're creating things. If that just gets down to one light, can someone let me know? The green lights, see the green lights? Yeah. It means the battery's going flat. I've got a plug in my bag, I can charge it up. So we're constantly creating things. It's the nature of our mind. We are human, that's what we do. We need to have concepts to live in the world. We need to conceive of various roles that we have. Like I'm Malcolm, right now I'm Malcolm the teacher, the Dharma teacher. Sometimes I'm Malcolm the psychologist. Sometimes I'm Malcolm the dad, Malcolm the granddad, Malcolm the partner, Malcolm the friend, Malcolm the bloke next door, or whatever. There's these multiple selves we have of ourselves, we create about ourselves. And we're constantly filling in that, we're living according to those concepts. And we have the illusion that it's a constant, stable thing. We have this illusion it's a constant, stable entity. And sometimes the self-concepts are quite healthy. I think it's quite a healthy self-concept to have as Malcolm, the Dharma teacher. I can feel quite good about that. I like to be Malcolm the granddad. It's really cool. It's really lovely. Especially when, I see my grandson after not seeing him for about a month, and I say, "Hello, Yasha," and he comes running up, and I pick him up and I throw him up, and it's so wonderful. All this oxytocin gets flying. Anyway, there are very healthy self-concepts, and we need concepts to function in the world. However, they can also be very unhealthy. And when we cling to various self-concepts as lasting and solid and this is who I am forever, then vulnerable to a lot of suffering. So I'll just tell you a little bit of a story about myself. I get psoriasis. You know, psoriasis is a skin condition. You might have seen it last night on my knees, because I had short pants on last night. I get it on my elbows and knees. And yeah, see that? Psoriasis. It's a skin condition. It's my father's fault, really. And it's his father's fault, or maybe his mother's fault. I'm not sure where it goes from there, but I know it comes down to my father's gene because my father's background, ancestry, because I remember seeing my father with psoriasis everywhere. And I see my nieces, and my son just had his first psoriasis, which is unfortunate. Anyway, like a little patch on his arm. I get psoriasis. And sometimes it comes in quite, well, it comes from genes, it comes from when you get stressed, it comes from diet, like there's certain things I won't eat. I tend not to eat chili and tomato because that makes it worse. I don't eat chocolate because that makes it worse. It also happens when there's abrasion, like you rub it. So there's all these, and if you wear clothes that are washed in, you get in contact with substances that are not so, that there's a reaction to, like if I wash my clothes in really harsh soap, it might start to react. So I get this psoriasis, and sometimes it develops in really embarrassing places. And you know, I can see that it's developing in those places because I might be a little bit stressed. Sometimes it's developed on my face. The first time I got it was just all over my forehead. And if you're talking to people and you're looking at their eyes and you see their eyes kind of go up and again, there's a look of disgust on their face. What's that? You got really bad dandruff. Or whatever it was. It was really kind of embarrassing, I suppose. And anyway, so I get psoriasis. Sometimes it's very uncomfortable, and sometimes it's in embarrassing places. And one time I was teaching a weekend workshop with a bunch of psychologists. It was for the APS. And there was a bit of evidence about how psoriasis, mindfulness meditation is helpful for psoriasis. And here I was, psoriasis around my ears, psoriasis on my elbows. And these people came up, the psychologists came up, this is about 10, 12, 15 years ago. What's happening? Why are you getting psoriasis? People that meditate shouldn't get psoriasis, you shouldn't be stressed. I said, well, it just happens. I'm sorry, this just happens. So every now and then I get a little bit embarrassed about it. And it's easy to feel ashamed, like it's easy to feel shame about it. You know shame? You know what that experience is? Brené Brown defines shame as the fear of disconnect. I think there's a lot we could talk about shame, but it is related to not wanting another to know about something, wanting to hide from something. You know the Auslan, is this the Auslan sign for shame, Bill? Oh, yeah, that's the Auslan sign for shame. It's like you want to hide. You want to cringe. You don't want someone to know about something for fear that they will think badly of you. And this is a genetic, evolutionary type, it's an emotion, and like all emotions, there's an evolutionary basis for it. It's really important for us to be part of the tribe. 40,000 years ago, if we were rejected from the tribe, we would not have survived. So there's a function in shame. We don't want to be rejected from the tribe. so we don't do things that might be shameful. Anyway, it gets really twisted and distorted, and it can be a very unwholesome mental state. I feel shame sometimes. I'd like to be a cool, calm, collected meditation teacher, Dharma teacher, serene. Fair complexion. And they describe this in the sutras. You know, someone with lots of loving kindness has fair, good skin, fair complexion. Serene, unstressed. Every now and then I feel like that. And I really like it. But when I get psoriasis, and I start thinking, oh God, I'm ashamed of this. What am I stressing about? I'm not serene at all. I'm a bit stressed out. I want to hide from people about it. I'm having a self-concept. So you can see what's happening here. I'm clinging to one self-concept, the idea of Malcolm, the Dharma teacher. Malcolm, the wise psychologist. Malcolm, the meditator. Calm, serene, appealing, good-looking, good skin, blah, blah, blah. And what I get is something else. So this idea, and then I might start comparing myself to someone else or a time when I was before. So this whole idea of clinging to a self-concept can be problematic. If I could see through this process of story making, can you see how I'm conceiving it? Can you see the process of conceiving it, story making? I'm becoming something. The more I feed into it, the more it becomes sort of real. I just read a novel actually. I wasn't planning to talk about this, but I just read a novel. It was called Lincoln in the Bardo. It was fantastic. And was centred, I won't go into great details about what it was all about, but they spent a lot of time in a graveyard where there were spirits in the bardo, and Lincoln's son Willie was stuck in the bardo in a graveyard. And at night all these spirits would come out and converse, and they would manifest in particular ways. Really like energetic manifestations. And you know, the author really skillfully described all these manifestations of these spirits depending on their habits and patterns. And it's sort of like that. You walk around in the world and you see these people kind of carrying around these concepts of themselves, like bubbles of energy. And they're all kind of, some of them really twisted up and some of them really cool, calm, collected. Some of them are kind of, some of these energies are sort of obsessed in something. They're all clinging onto a self, an idea of a self-concept. They're all sort of in this bubble. We are all, I'm saying they, but I'm included in this. So there's this idea of insight to free us from the binds and the fetters. And this idea of insight is that we begin to see things as they actually are, and we don't feed into stories about things. We begin to just be present with the way things actually are, and we develop right view. Insight and right view are pretty closely aligned. I'd say that they're almost synonymous. Wrong view is like this. Part of wrong view, you remember how I spoke about the Eightfold Path last night? There's right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, courageous effort, right mindfulness and right concentration, and it goes in a wheel. They all work together. Like in context, they all join up to work together to free us. And it's depicted like a wheel that rolls, and the more it rolls, the more it gains momentum, and the more powerful it gets. So I talked about right view and wrong view. Remember that? Right view is usually the first one on the path, but it doesn't really, it's sort of like a cycle more than anything else. Wrong view is seeing things as permanent that are not permanent. Seeing things as self that cannot be self. And seeing things as an enduring source of happiness that simply do not deliver that promise, that simply do not deliver happiness. Another part of wrong view is the idea that actions don't have consequences. The fact that, you know, what we do in the world, what we do to one another, doesn't have an impact. That we can go out and, you know, deceive people and feel that it doesn't have an impact. Right view, on the other hand, is the understanding that all things are impermanent. That everything is interdependent. That everything is, I'm going to use the word dukkha here again, but in a different way. Changing things are unable to provide enduring happiness because they change. Does that make sense? You know, this computer, I really like it, but it's changing. It doesn't give me ultimate happiness, even though, you know, they advertise it as being the latest, greatest thing. It doesn't actually give me that, what it promises to give me. It doesn't actually give me enduring happiness. So, these qualities are called the three characteristics of existence. In Pali, anicca, dukkha, anatta. Another way of describing anatta, or interdependence, is not self. It's also described as emptiness sometimes. What we mean by that is that nothing solid can be found in this world. Nothing solid and independent can be found. Everything is dependent on other things. There's this interconnection between things. The way I am right now is dependent to a large degree on how you guys are. Not completely. If you were all really lying down and falling to sleep and, you know, completely snoring and all the rest of it, I would feel very different. Some of you are paying attention to me, so it makes me feel different. I'm relating to you. I'm part of. You're influencing me. I didn't come here. I'm not this out of nothing. I didn't arise out of nothing. I've arisen out of a whole bunch of things coming together, including, you know, the sparkle in my mother's eye when my father kind of winked at her, or whatever he did, including the food I eat, including, you know, my lifestyle, all sorts of it, all things coming together. I'm not independently arising. I'm an interdependent phenomenon. So this is one way we can understand not self. There's no single thing. Everything is interdependent. Another way we can understand not self is that we have an illusion of something continuously moving through time. But when you think about it, time is like a concept. And as I was just saying, we conceive of these different beings moving through time. You know, I conceive of Malcolm, the various concepts I have, you know, Malcolm your dad, Malcolm granddad, blah, 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 blah. And I create this continuity that I call me. That I call me, I, and myself. But if we actually looked at what's going on, we would see that there's just, it's illusionary. Just like, I made a film once, and in the old days they used to make films out of these celluloid strips. and there was a lot of little frames. There were single frames. Can you remember these ones? And all the frames would kind of move together, and you get this picture of someone moving through space and time. But it's actually just a bunch of single frames. I guess you could do it in the digital way as well. Like when we look at a screen, it's just lots of little pixels that kind of arise and change. And, millions of them, well, maybe not millions of them, but lots of them on a screen. And they're all changing. And they create a picture. And we believe it to be real. But it's actually an illusion. Do you agree with that? Or am I just kind of throwing that idea out there? Yes, no? Okay. So there's what we conceive ourselves to be is in fact illusionary. And we carry these illusions around with us, sometimes making us feel good, like the illusion of Malcolm, the Dharma teacher, the serene, calm, cool, collected, appealing, good-skinned, Dharma teacher. Or Malcolm, the psoriasis. Sometimes they're pleasant, sometimes they're really unpleasant, like Malcolm, the psoriasis, ugly, kind of scratchy, itchy person, who's kind of trying to pretend he's calm and cool and collected, but he's actually kind of really uptight because he's so itchy. This is another concept. All these concepts are simply illusionary. And if we can just start to see this, if we can see this process, if we can slow the film down enough to see the separate frames, we start to break through this illusion of separate selfness. And it is incredibly liberating. Another way of thinking about it is, say if someone's insulting you, and I see people that are insulted all the time, or something's happening to you, we take it personally. To the extent we take it personally, to that extent we suffer. Does anybody notice? Has anybody ever taken any insults personally? Yeah? We kind of take it on. We own it. Someone calls us whatever they want to call us. I've been called lots of things. And we believe them. We say, yeah, that's what I am. I am that stupid, useless, false fraud of a psychologist, for example. I've had people say that to me. You're a fraud. What do you think you're a psychologist? You're not doing me any good. I mean, people say this to you, and I'm sure, or maybe some of you haven't had that said to you, but I'm sure there's been some insults directed at you. There's a saying, what I say to my clients, what other people say and think about you is none of your business. And it's true. It's like what they throw at you, you can just kind of let it fly by because you don't need to take it personally. So this is an aspect of not self. This is an aspect of seeing through the illusion of self and even tasting that sense of freedom from not identifying with concepts, not identifying with a personality, not identifying with experiences as if they are me, I, and myself. And there's another aspect to this, and it's all connected. And this aspect is the aspect of ownership and control. Excuse me, I've just got to have a not-self drink. The idea of ownership and the idea of control, we like to be able to control things. We would like to be able to control our emotions, our thoughts, our health. We would like to be able to control things the way we want them to be or the way they should be. And there's some capacity for us to change things in the world. But inevitably, we can't control things. We can't control the fact that we're growing old. We can't control the fact that we, each and every one of us will inevitably become ill in some way or other. Something will happen. We can't control the fact that we'll eventually die. We can't even control, various thoughts that come into our head. But we like to create the illusion of control. And the more we try to feel like we can control or we want to control, the more suffering there is. In Thailand, when they talked about not self, I can hear the teachers saying it in Thai, "Bang up my dialogue." This, you just can't control it. You can't do it. When clients come to me and they say, "I want to control my mind," I say, I like to take the word control out. And I say, well, let's talk about choice. You can choose to feed into something, or you can choose not to feed into it. So that's the way I get around it. It is possible to choose to feed into things. And it is possible to make good choices so you don't feed into destructive emotions, for example. I'll reinforce that. You don't feed into difficult, erroneous thinking patterns. It's possible to do that, but it's not about controlling it. The other main issue is also ownership. Ownership. And this is really, really important because we think we own ourselves. But if we actually don't own ourselves, we can't own anything because nothing lasts. When I was a monk, there's a tradition when you're ordaining as a monk, you chant, and as you're getting your head shaved, you chant a chant, and it goes something like hair of head, body, nails, teeth, and skin. Something like that. I think something like that. And as you're saying hair of head, the hair that we call, my lovely hairstyle, I call my hair, it's being shaved off and it's falling on the ground, and you can see it falling on the ground. Right here, right now, it's me, my head, my hair. Then it falls on the ground and it's not my hair anymore, it's hair over there, or you cut your fingernails off. They're lying on the ground. They're not my fingernails, they're just fingernails. Or you can do that with the whole of your body. In fact, there's a practice. It's in the mindfulness of body section where you imagine parts of your body put out in front of you and you see them as if just bits and pieces pulling out of a bag and putting them separately in front of you. Like your hair and your skin and liver and your intestines, all these different parts of you. It sounds a bit weird, doesn't it? And but it's mindfulness of body practice, and I've done it. And it's really, really useful, it's really powerful. Anyway, it gives you a good sort of sense of the way we conceive about our body as something beautiful and something worthy of adorning, worthy of putting makeup on and all the rest of it. Just gives you a different perspective on your body. And the trick with the liberating thing with having insight into the not-self nature of things is that, well, I'll go back a bit. When we own something, and I like to own my Mac, I think that's my Mac, and that's my video camera. I like to own that. If someone just walked in here and said, "Oh, I'll take that, thanks very much," and they walked out, I would feel distressed because that's my property. If it wasn't my property, I wouldn't be distressed. If it was just, you know, something that was here available, I wouldn't feel so distressed. But because it's my property, because I feel like I own it, I get distressed. So if we lose parts of ourselves, like our various concepts of ourselves, or we lose even our jobs or whatever it is, if we feel like we didn't own it in the beginning, then we don't get so stressed. It's a simple formula for reducing suffering. Not self and understanding you can't really own anything leads to freedom from suffering. Having that attitude, it's like an attitude more than anything else. It's just an attitude. It's a view. The not-self nature of things. So, I've got about 10 minutes. Insight meditation. Insight is about seeing clearly. In Pali it's called Vipassana. Vipassana, you might have heard that as a particular meditation approach. It literally means seeing clearly. Vit means intense or distinct. Passana means seeing. Vipassana means seeing distinctly, seeing clearly, seeing things as they are. And the Vipassana that you might have heard about is from a tradition, Yuba tradition from Burma, then Burma or Myanmar. And a famous meditation teacher, originally an Indian businessman, went to Burma and trained in this, and his name was Goenkaji. And he created a package, and it's done amazing things. And it is just one particular style of insight meditation. So, do you remember the Eightfold Path I was talking about? How it's 3 components: wisdom, ethics, behavioural lifestyle, and meditation. In the meditation aspect of it, in the meditation component, there are 2 aspects. One aspect is called serenity, the other aspect is called insight. And serenity and insight work together. They're 2 aspects of meditation. They're like 2 ends of a stick. They work together and you can't really separate them. Sometimes we will incline to doing more insight meditation. Sometimes we will incline to doing more serenity meditation. The insight meditation variety is about inquiry, is about looking into, is about investigation, is about questioning what's happening here. How is this happening? It's about being curious about. And sometimes in some practices, in the Mahayana tradition, when they talk about insight meditation, it's analytical. It's literally thinking something through. but with a really powerfully concentrated mind. So that's the insight end of the spectrum. You need concentration for that. You also need a lot of mindfulness. In fact, mindfulness is emphasized. With all meditation, you'll have effort, mindfulness and concentration. And if you think about insight serenity as being two ends of a stick, two ends of a spectrum, insight is at one end of the spectrum, serenity is at the other. Along the middle you have concentration and mindfulness and effort. The mindfulness part of the meditation will be more inclined towards the insight side of the spectrum. The concentration, which I'll talk about tomorrow night, part of this is more at the serenity end of the spectrum. Serenity is more about collecting your attention, settling your mind, getting clarity, getting peaceful, being still, being calm, being clear. And they need each other. One without the other is really problematic. Insight without serenity, you can go crazy because of the things you see. You haven't got the resources to cope with it. And I've seen people become psychotic. I've even become psychotic a little bit myself when there's too much insight. Wow, really anxious people really anxious. You know, they go on a meditation retreat, 10 days meditation retreat or something like that. They're psychotic, they haven't developed any of the serenity to support it. And sometimes you can develop serenity and it's really lovely, you can get really peaceful, calm, but sometimes you can misdirect your concentration or the power that you get from serenity. Serenity brings muscle to insight. It gives it power to penetrate, to see clearly, to see deeply. And it also gives that calm resource. It gives that, it gives the capacity to be able to see the dukkha, basically, and not be overwhelmed by it, be able to cope with it. So, insight and serenity. There are many different insight meditation practices, and like I was saying, the Mahayana variety, they often analyse something, like literally thinking things through. Not dissimilar to cognitive therapy, for example, but the difference is that they will utilise this faculty of deep concentration when they're looking in an analytical way. Often, the way insight meditation is practiced and understood is as the four foundations of mindfulness. The four foundations of mindfulness that I mentioned this morning. And with the four foundations of mindfulness, you're constantly coming back to seeing things as they are. You're catching the story-making tendency. You can even note it and name it. You go, oh, that's just thinking. That's just a story. Oh, that's just my concept, self-concept. Oh, that's just blah, 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 blah. Coming back to what's actually happening. You bring your attention to what's present rather than getting caught up in the illusionary nature of things. And we talked about it as being in four areas. It's not just body, it's the whole of life. Our body, mind, every part of our life, every part of our experience. And I'll go into a little bit more detail tomorrow morning, and we'll work with difficult thoughts and emotions, and also maybe this concept of ourselves tomorrow in our little instruction section. And I did say this morning that I would talk about the hindrances. So maybe I can just briefly mention them again now, because they're worth noticing, they're worth being aware of. So they're within those fetters, those things that hold us back, but they're more specific to just meditation. Actually, I say they're specific to meditation, but they're relevant for life in general as well. So, the five hindrances. Obsessive desire, coming out of ourselves, constantly thinking that happiness is somewhere to be found over there. If only we could be out of where we are right now, somewhere over there, then everything will be all right. Once I get what I'm wanting, then I'll be all right. I'll have happiness finally. It's that illusion or delusion. I had a teacher once who said, I was talking to him, well, I was having an interview one time and I was talking about how I was having sexual fantasies during my meditation. And he said, Malcolm, the fantasy is better than the real thing. And he's kind of right. He's kind of right, actually. Anyway, so without getting too personal. So, obsessive desire, that's a hindrance. One way we work with it is to note it, to be present with it, to see it. Also to focus closely on what actually happens. Even if we fulfill our desires, like I used to be, when I was in Thailand, I think some of you heard this story, I was really skinny and the teacher used to feel sorry for me, I think. And we'd have one meal a day. It was glutinous rice, as I was saying. But in the evenings, they used to pull out, you could eat some specific things that were called medicines, like late evening, afternoon. And we'll all come together and have a cup of tea. And they'd bring out sugar, like pieces of sugar, and just eat the sugar like having a biscuit. It was terrible. Anyway, every now and then, my teacher used to get some really nice chocolate. Just a bar of, really beautiful dark chocolate. And it was okay to eat. And he used to see me and he'd go, come. That was my nickname, come, which I thought was nice. Thais couldn't say Malcolm very well, so I'd go, come. And it was kind of weird because it was like, come, but it was the same as in the English word of saying come. Anyway, come. And he'd give me the chocolate. And I go, oh, wow, chocolate. And I wouldn't eat it there, and then I'd just kind of hang out for it. I was so hungry. And I put it to my mouth and the tongue. It was just an explosion of taste. Whoa! All the dopamine was going through my body. And then I'd finish. And I'd want more. Did you ever notice that when you eat chocolate? Anyway, one way we can work with obsessive desire is to see how what we're wanting is impermanent. To really focus closely on it. They say focus very, very closely on it to enhance concentration on it. That's one way of dealing with it. You develop an insight, and I'd be sitting there going, it's all impermanent, but I still want more. Anyway, ill will. Ill will is this kind of hot rejection of things. And you might find yourself feeling ill will on meditation, because I've felt it on meditation retreats, like sitting next to someone who's kind of breathing too loudly, or disturbing my meditation in some way, like writing too loudly or something like that. It's really useless. I mean, you kind of wish they wouldn't do that, and you start to get obsessed with getting away from them, pushing away from them. One way to deal with that particular hindrance is with the cultivation of loving kindness, which is kind of open-heartedness. Sometimes it's described as anger, but really it's not anger. Anger is just an emotion, really, but it's the ill will that's behind it. Either way, loving kindness can work with anger very dramatically. It can sort of cool it down a lot, and it can soothe ill will. The other major strategy, of course, with all these hindrances, a major strategy is just to be mindful, very closely mindful of them, noting them for what they are. And if you can note the hindrance, it's really, really more powerful than just noting hearing or the breath or whatever it is. it's like cutting to the chase. You get the hindrance. That's what it is. It's just aversion. I went on some of you heard this story, well, I went on a retreat. It was just a 2-day retreat by myself up in Bodhi Tree. Anybody knows Bodhi Tree in Lisbon? It's a monastery, I think. And I was set up, I was just going to sit for 4 days. I woke up, I sat in the evening, it was really peaceful. I got up in the morning, early in the morning, like 4 o'clock in the morning, it was so peaceful. Wonderful. I'm just sitting away. About 8 o'clock I could hear this noise. Yim, yim, yim. And I'm just going, oh, just hearing. Come back in my bed. Yim, 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 yim. I'm getting really kind of agitated, trying to note hearing. And I got up and I looked across the paddock, and some kids had set up a motocross with their motorcycles. They set up a camp and they were there for the weekend, going to do circles in the paddock with their motorcycles. Why would they do that? Why would they, how dare they do that on my weekend? Close to my paddock, close to my shed. That's not fair. Anyway, I struggle with it a bit. And then when I eventually noted aversion, and I decided to focus on aversion and understand it, no more problem. It was really powerful meditation. Noticing aversion, noticing how I experience it. So, another way of dealing with aversion is to investigate it, to see it clearly, see it for what it is. Restlessness and worry. Actually, traditionally it's mental thickness and dullness. One way to deal with that is kind of an energetic thing. One way to do that is to enhance your interest in things, to make something interesting rather than boring, to get really closely focused on it. And also change your posture. Sometimes that happens when we kind of, our energies are stuck, like stand up, walk, do something like that. And not to be confused with when you're sleepy, when you really need to sleep. But if you don't need to sleep, sometimes it manifests as kind of nodding off all the time. One time I was doing this, I was doing a 3-month retreat in IMS, and I noticed, there was whole Mexican waves of people dropping like this, going off to sleep. Like, you got looked out at the 100 people and they're all going to go like this. So what I did there was to open my eyes and pay close attention to the moment that my head was starting to drop forward. It was close investigation. I was getting myself really interested in that subtle experience. So I woke up. I mean, I could have gone outside, looked at the stars, turned on the lights, stood up, gone walking, or something like that. That would have helped. Restlessness and worry is, again, mindfulness, to note it, name it. Oh, it's just restlessness, just worry, just agitation. That's what it is. But another thing to do is to kind of let your mind be expansive and do something that brings joy to the heart. Like, if you're feeling kind of restless and worried, you really want to sit through another couple of hours, I'm determined to sit through 3 hours of the afternoon and just going in the room and out 10 metres away. And you're really restless and agitated. It might be better to do something that chills out, something that brings joy to your heart, like go for a walk down the beach and just look at the waves. Something like that. Something that is relaxing. And traditionally, one way you deal with that is to do things that are relaxing, to calm down. And the way I do that is I might go out on the beach, look at a view, get my mental space expanded somehow. Then chronic procrastination. It's like this lack of confidence in ourselves. And the traditional the traditional analogy that's used is like, they say a man, could be a woman as well, at the fork of a road, not knowing which direction to take. So they don't go in any direction. They just sort of feel stuck. Yeah. And I know some people, I've worked in psychiatric wards, and people with catatonia, and they're stuck in the doorways. You know, it's really horrific, horrible. See, they don't know whether to move forward or backwards. That's a gross example of this chronic procrastination. The way we deal with that is to build our confidence, to build confidence in what we're doing. And the way we can do that is by developing trust or confidence, basically. If it's about meditation, and this is classically the way it's described, it's like, for example, not trusting what you're doing is of any value, so you don't bother doing it. You just don't bother. I remember when I first started to teach mindfulness to psychologists, someone would come along for free. They'd sit up to bed, kind of laughing at, eating raisins. What's that got to do with anything? It was kind of, it was like they were stuck and they weren't willing to try and see what's happened, see what happens. And what would have helped would have them have some psychoeducation and understand it, and then put forth the willingness to try, to give it a go. So that's some ways, in Pali it's called saddha. Saddha is often translated as faith, and it's cultivating faith that works with chronic procrastination. And you cultivate faith by a bit of understanding. Okay. I think that's enough for the moment. So thank you.